I just want to start off with this Bible verse in the book of John. And we're going to be starting off in chapter 4, verse 14. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. And so what Christ was saying here basically was him and his teachings, right? Everything he stands for. When you take on his spirit, he provides you with those living waters. And the analogy that I want to make here today is that, right, that type of living water is a water that we all survive off. Now, I was almost going to say that we're a human being, right? I'll try and refrain from saying human being. Us men and women created in the image of the Most High, well, we basically need H2O to survive, right? We need water to survive. Just like the fish in the water, right, at the sea. Right, we know that the Most High created the seawater. But you see, the seawater is something that we cannot consume. What happens if we drink the seawater? We will then become sick, won't we? So the H2O that we need is just that. It's pure H2O. And so the analogy that I was using here with Christ, right, he's saying that basically the water that is sprung up from a well, that water that is underneath the ground, that water is something that is pure, right? So that pure water that gets sprang forth from the ground, and we know many, many years ago, right, it was just a normal thing that, everybody in their houses, right, everybody had their own well. And what they would do is they would draw water from that well. So we know that everything that comes from the ground, that water there is pure. That's the pure water that us, that mankind has been ordained to drink, right? And we need that water to survive, right? If we don't have that water to survive, that fuel there, that fuel that we need, right, to keep going. That's why Christ was using that analogy, saying that he is the living waters that we need, right? So instead of drinking that living water in the flesh, what he simply meant was, take me on in the spirit, and I will give you everything you need. So I thought I'd use that quick analogy there just to, understand the importance of, living waters, right? And the water that they used to consume from the well, right? Which was just such a normalcy that, every single household, would have had their own source of water. Every single household would have had their own source of water to, consume from the ground, right? So back then, it was only completely normal. Now, fast forward all of these years, right? Let me ask you this question. What water are we now told that we have to consume? Right, so nowadays, a lot of, what we see here about getting water from the ground, we now somewhat have these restrictions placed upon us. Right, so the only options that we basically have are, whatever state we're living in, we have our mains water, right? And so the mains water comes from the government, right?